Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Stern, and I'm the director and CEO of the Fritz Ascher Society for Persecuted, Ostracized, and Banned Art, based in New York. We research, discuss, publish, and exhibit artists whose life and work were affected by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. Welcome to Lilly Renee, From Refugee to Renown. It is my pleasure to welcome today's distinguished speakers, award-winning historian and writer Trina Robbins, and two people who made the feature film Lilly from 2019 possible, Mexican-American director Adrienne Gruben and executive producer David Armstrong. And maybe, just maybe, Lilly listens herself. We'll start today's event with a trailer of Lilly and Adrienne Gruben's story of discovery. Then Trina Robbins, who's really the one who first brought Lilly Renee to public attention, will speak about the artist and her importance in the male-dominated comic book world. These two presentations will be followed by a presentation by David Armstrong and a moderated conversation between the panelists. So I will now share my screen. First of all, just a second. Can you please all take off your video so the screening is... no, that's the wrong one. Okay. Right now it's black, so let's try again. Okay, here we go.
So you want me to pick that up or shall I leave it down?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Whatever feels good for you.
No, what's good for you is you were holding the camera.
Okay.
In Vienna, everybody was artistic. My father used to take me to the museum. It was good for me visually. And I started drawing at a very early age. Civilization is just a veneer. And I wanted this chapter to be over. Suddenly, I felt free for the first time in my life. And I wanted to draw. I came up with these fantastic stories. So this became a very popular strip. I liked fighting the Germans, even if I was just doing it on paper, it was good. I had an experience that was the most exciting thing in my life. And it was an extraordinary experience.
Okay, now we have to put on our videos. Just a second. So I'm thrilled to introduce Mexican-American director Adrienne Gruben, who spent 5 years bringing Lilly Renee Phillips' story to light for her film Lilly. Formerly a producer, Mrs. Gruben's credits include Treasure Island, Sundance Special Jury Prize winner 1999, Running with the Bulls, IFC Comedy Special 2003, and You're Gonna Miss Me, Independent Spirit Award nominee 2007. A documentary exploring the life of legendary musician Rocky Erickson. In 2017, she directed a drag queen variety Christmas special for OutTV Canada and went on to direct The Queens, which followed the lives of 4 famous drag queens, as well as comedy specials for internationally acclaimed drag performers Katya, Trixie, Alexa, and Bob the Drag Queen. Welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really exciting. When we were invited, Lilly's children had mentioned this event to us and Rachel to us, and we're so grateful to be a part of it and share Lily's story. I'll be brief because Trina and David have amazing historical background and context and their own interactions with Lilly. So in, I believe, 2011 or 12, I was reading a Newsweek article about Lilly, and I became captivated by her story. And she had been sort of pulled out of obscurity. She'd lived this amazing life and then was living quietly in New York City. And Trina, in her travels, had worked to find Lilly and had found her and had written about her. And then the Newsweek journalist had written about her, and I came upon this story. And for some bizarre reason, even though I'd spent most of my career producing other people's things and working on other people's marketing campaigns, I knew I had to tell her story. So I worked really hard to find her. David later told me that she was in the phone book, but that seemed so analog that I didn't even think to look there. I found Trina. Trina had to do a little bit of work with Lilly to get an introduction because Lilly is very discerning. Her bar for interactions with people and for art is very high. So I made the introduction. Trina made the introduction. I met her over the phone first, and she was very dubious. And I basically had to fly myself to New York from Los Angeles to present my case to tell her story. And she was still dubious. And I think if you asked her today, she would still be dubious. But I'm so grateful she allowed me into her life. And over 3 different periods of 3 different sittings over a period of a year and a half, we sat and she began to tell me her story. And it was an incredible story of being in Vienna, escaping the Nazis, hiding out, and becoming one of the first female comic book artists in the golden age of comics. And her stories of the early days of comics and being one of 2 women in that environment writing, you can imagine. And she sat and told me those stories, and then stories of her personal life after she quit comics, and she continued to paint, but just not comics. And she put me through my paces. She made sure the quality of the work was always high, but the crew and I were captivated by her. She has a charismatic presence, and I felt really lucky to hear about her art and, the first time she put pen to paper as a child, and the fact that her brain just operated differently than everyone else she was surrounded by in Vienna, including her parents. And she, in a way, found her place in comics, but also, and David might share this a little more, a lot of comic book artists at the time didn't revere the medium the way people do now. And in some ways, they sometimes thought it was beneath them. And I think for the ones who are still alive from that era, they've come to recognize that it was an art form, that it is art, and they're getting a lot of accolades now. And I think when Lilly first went to Comic-Con, I can't remember what year that was. I think you were with her, Trina.
Yes, I was.
She was
but I don't remember the year.
She was very overwhelmed. She thought my small experience in this art room back in the day is now part of this large movement. So I think she herself.
I think it was 2018.
Yes, and so I just think she's still at 100, still trying to understand her place in this huge phenomenon. So, my experiences were amazing, and she made me a better director because she really put me through my paces. She wanted to see the work. And I think that was her approach to her own art as well. So, and with that, I'll turn it over to my amazing co-panelists.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. I now have the honor to introduce award-winning Herstorian and writer Trina Robbins, who has been writing books, comics, and graphic novels for over 50 years. She has written and drawn comics from Wonder Woman to Barbie. Her 2009 book, The Brinkley Girls, the best of Nell Brinkley's cartoons from 1913 to 1940, and her 2011 book, Tarpe, Mills, and Miss Fury, were nominated for Eisner Awards and Harvey Awards. Her all-ages graphic novel Chicagoland Detective Agency, The Drained Brains Caper, first in a 6-book series, was a Junior Library Guild selection. Her graphic novel, Renee, Escape Artist, was awarded a gold medal from Moonbeam Children's Books and a silver medal from Sidney Taylor Jewish Library Awards. Trina's most recent book is The Flapper Queens, her history of women cartoonists of the Jazz Age, cartoonists. In 2013, Trina was voted into the Will Eisner Comic Book Hall of Fame. Welcome, Trina. And I will get the PowerPoint started. So just give me
Thank you.
So let's see. Okay.
Okay, this is Lilly. Oops, thank you. This is Lilly. This is an example of Lily's work as a child. Her maiden name was Wilhelm, Lilly Wilhelm. And you know, what I see in her work is that she's very influenced by German Expressionism, which of course was the popular art form in those days. Think of people like Klimt or Egon Schiele. This is just amazing for a child. Go on. Can you, thank you. Whoops, no, that's right, thank you. This is Lilly when she was still in Austria, photographed when she's still in Austria, quite young. And this is her passport. This is the passport that she had to get in 1938, so that at that point, the Nazis had marched into Vienna and taken over. And she came to England via Kindertransport. In case you don't know what Kindertransport was, it's a big gold star for England for what they did. When the Nazis started invading these other countries, England saw what was happening and what was being done to the Jews. And they made an agreement in 1938 with the Nazis that they would take whatever Jewish children under the age of 17, they would take them if they could find sponsors. And that's what Lilly did. She found a sponsor, a pen pal in England, and she escaped the Nazis by Kindertransport. Can we have the next one? All right. She eventually got to America and was living there with her parents in a tenement, really, that was populated all by refugees. And like the other refugees, they were living hand to mouth. They'd been a very well-off family in Vienna, but they just, of course, had to give everything to the Nazis. Her mother, Lilly, was doing various kind of side jobs. She was doing fashion modeling because she was very beautiful. And she was painting little boxes with Austrian, peasant designs. And her mother saw an ad in the paper saying that a certain publishing company, Fiction House, was looking for artists. And of course, what happened during the war, as in every other industry, the men who were working in the industries went off to war, and they had to hire women for the first time. So women were they were building the planes, they were flying the planes, they were driving the buses and trucks, and they were drawing comics for the first time. Lilly was one of the first people hired. These are the panels that she drew as a sample of her comic work, and this is what got her hired. She says it's Tarzan and Jane. Go on. Next, please. All right, her panels. Look at these panels. They're not the typical comic panel in those days. Wait, go back. Oh, all right, okay. This is Lilly. Okay. What happened to those panels I was showing you? Can we go back? All right, I guess we can't go back, but this is a good example of her work. She's very, you can see that it isn't just a comic, it's extremely decorative. You know, look how she drew this beautiful, to your left, this beautiful splash panel. You know, it's, what I see here is, you know, they've been burned out by the Nazis, but the little boy, there's kind of a panel in the way, but there's a little boy in this, and he's holding up, it looks like the French flag, the tricolore. Whoa, whoa, wait. Thank you. There you go. He's holding up the tricolore. They're not giving up. And this one with the exquisite, the beautiful design all around the ends, the framing is just, you know, her art is really showing. These do not look like typical comic panels of the time. Okay, now you can move on. You can move on if you, thank you. And look at the shapes of her panels. Now I have to tell you that the company she worked for, Fiction House, was actually known for doing very creative panels, not just the typical 6-panel grid, but hers are amazing. This one to your right that looks like a chessboard is just incredible. And the story is being told on a chessboard. So that's why this works so well. And the other one, just really the panels that are at all these angles really show what the main character is, that bearded guy, and what he is going through, the panic that he's going through. Now you can move on. Can you move on? Thank you. This is, oh, whoa. Let's get back to Senorita Rio, can we? To that cover. Oh, thank you. This cover is iconic at this point. The cover with her having a sword fight in her wonderful Carmen Miranda outfit. Senorita Rio, I think this is her best character. She drew a number of different characters, but Senorita Rio, who is this counter spy who masquerades in her alternate ego. She's a nightclub entertainer and a movie star, but in her other life, she's a counter spy. And again, the beautiful, Lilly has said, this is a good panel to show it. Lilly has said, because she was still very poor, and she has said that Senorita Rio was kind of her escape into a fantasy world where she could wear leopard skin coats, you know, and dress so beautifully in her high-heeled shoes. And at the same time, she was fighting Nazis on paper. This was during the war, and Senorita Rio was fighting Nazis. So she was really basically fighting Nazis with pen and paper. Go on. This is a panel from a Senorita Rio comic strip. You notice that one of them is just penciled. That's because she drew a different panel instead and pasted it in. And the paste has long since dried up and the other panel fell out, but I do have the other panel. I have it, but this is a nice way to show what the originals looked like. You see these little comments and notes in blue pencil because blue pencil didn't show. Go on. This is another comic she did, The Lost World, in which again, the villains who are from the planet Volta are really thinly disguised Nazis. Again, her characters are fighting Nazis. Go on.
And they're really ugly.
And of course they're ugly. This is a graphic novel that I wrote about Lilly. Lilly Renee, Escape Artist, which basically tells, because her story is like a comic, you know how she had to escape the Nazis. So this tells the story of how she got away and how she came to New York and eventually found work as a comic artist. And it's available. You can find it on Amazon and maybe even at your local comic book store. Go on. Where's that it? Ah, this was Lilly. How many years ago? Maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
Yes.
Still beautiful.
Yeah.
Still beautiful
amazing.
because, you know, what I have discovered is that when you start out beautiful, you stay beautiful. Look at her. She's extremely, you know, so elegant, so elegant. And I think that's is that the last panel? Yes.
Rachel, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you so much, Trina. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's third panelist, David Armstrong, who has been involved with the feature film and television production and distribution businesses for over 50 years. Starting at the American Film Institute Center for Advanced Film Studies, he worked for John Cassavetes' production company, Faces International Films, as a film editor on A Woman Under the Influence. Armstrong has held executive positions at Western Television, All American Television, USA Networks International, and MGM Worldwide Television Group. Armstrong is the co-producer of an animated pilot for Frank Cho's Liberty Meadows and the executive producer of Lilly, about the pioneering comic book artist Lilly Renee. Welcome, David. I can't wait to hear how you got involved with Lilly.
Thank you very much. It was an interesting story. I got a phone call from a friend of mine, a comic book writer, who said to me, "Do you know who Lilly Renee is?" And I had seen the Newsweek article, and I actually had some of her stories in my collection, so I did know who she was. And he said, "I have a friend of mine who's making a film. Maybe you can help her out." And so I called, and then I called, and then I called, and then I realized after I finally got a hold of Adrienne that she's a very busy person, has a very good and extensive job at a big company. So I understood why it took a while to get back. We had a long conversation. She sent me the work print, the rough cut of the film that she had. And I immediately fell in love with it because it really portrayed a person extremely well. And Lilly is a fascinating woman. I mean, her career has been amazing, and she in person is a presence, to be sure, and very fascinating to talk to. So I looked at what was there and decided there are things that I could bring to the table to help finish the film. I brought in a composer. We did some illustrations. I had done a documentary in the past, so we got archive footage from the Library of Congress, and I had an editor I work with do some effects pieces to be able to highlight the way that Lilly laid out a page and draped characters across several panels, which was a really interesting technique that she used pretty frequently. So what I wanted to do was basically run a slideshow of her work. I ended up getting about 250 images at one point, which we went through to be able to pull stuff that we needed for a film montage and for some of the effects that we did. But I came to find that she was a fascinating person. And at one point in her career, well, let me run the slideshow so you get a chance to take a look at it and we can talk through it. And obviously Trina has a lot of background. She's more than welcome, and Adrienne is more than welcome to join in when we run the show. So I'm going to bring the screen up.
While you start to get the show ready, I am going to jump in and say, when I met what became our mutual friend, I was in a documentary slump because my editor and I we're kind of in that like point in the edit where we didn't know we were going. We almost had enough for a feature film because after comics, her life is also really amazing. And we were in this documentary depression, and I was complaining to this friend at a party. And he was like, I know just the guy. And David was immediately able to bring his, film and distribution. And I mean, he edited a John Cassavetes movie that I was obsessed with. So he immediately had me there. And he was able to put her in historical context. He was able to supply stock footage. We were just going online to get stock footage because we didn't have that extra like depth of knowledge. And he was like, oh, I can finish this out and put it in its context. So while we worked on the story of the person and the character that she was, he was able to round it out and bring the images. And so it was a great partnership. And he also understood my day job because he had done a version of it. So we worked, and luckily, David can tell you, we had access to all like these top, the guys who do color and mix for big movies. They came and did our movie for next to nothing. And so we got the benefit of that too. And so it got to look and sound better than a lot of documentaries at that level. So anyway, without David, this film would not have been finished.
Well, we actually set a deadline. I made a date with Comic-Con so that we would have to show it and we would have to finish it. And I think that helped get us there too. So we went through all the Jane Martin stuff. This is Lost World. And what I did was I wanted to show a story from each one of the characters that she did so we could take a look at the progression of the panels. Because as Trina said, she was phenomenal at being able to lay out a page so that it told the story. And she was, and in most cases, she always had very strong female characters so that she could highlight that. And that was pretty unusual in the time because men were running the business. But of course, World War II came along and took a lot of these people either by enlistment or by draft. And it left a void, a little bit of a void in the comic book business. And we were all fortunate to know that Lilly filled part of that void. And you can see that her work was pretty amazing. She started working in probably late 1942, because her first published work was in Jane Martin in March of 1943. And the dates of the publication generally were 2 or 3 months in advance of when they actually hit the stand. And it was a device so that news dealers wouldn't take it off the stands. It would sit there for weeks to be able to sell. But you can see that she does. I mean, and you can see the German helmet almost on the alien. You can see the way it was processed and put on the paper, as Trina said, to show that the Germans were the villains. And I think she really appreciated having the ability to state her mind and her case by battling the Nazis, both through Senorita Rio and by proxy through Lost World. But if you look at all of her splash pages, and here's an original page from one of the splash pages, and this is what it looks like when it's colored and printed. Almost every one of her splash pages has it, and you can see how that panel on the right side is draped over several panels. It's obviously to gain attention to that figure in the page and help tell the story. And you can see that she's dripping over a second panel there. The Senorita Rio, and there's another example of her being huge in the page. Senorita, all of the splash pages have a very, very big female figure in it, and she really enjoyed costuming those figures, particularly in Senorita Rio. As Trina said, she was a model. The character in the strip was a model. And there she is. She looks like she's stepping out of Casablanca in that piece.
David, she's not a model. She's an entertainer. She's a nightclub entertainer and a dancer and a singer and an actress, but not a model.
You're right. And
But
there,
Lilly was a model.
yeah, exactly. And you can see that every one of these pieces has her dressed in a completely different outfit. Another splash page. This one's from Werewolf Hunter, which was the first character that she did as a continuing character. This is a particularly interesting story because we use this in the film to show the transition from a woman to a cat. It's funny. When she talked about it in the film, Lilly said that she didn't really want to follow werewolves, so she made cats kind of the focus on a lot of the Werewolf Hunter pieces. And you can see her, the bottom panel on the left, she's vamping as a cat. Here's the other thing is, if you look at the shadows there, she did a really wonderful job of setting the atmosphere, very much like a film noir piece would do by the actual content of the piece. This is an interesting piece because that particular image was used in the Silver Age of comics with the Justice League. So obviously, artists swiped from her and used her as a base point. There's another original, and that's the way it was printed. It was interesting. I went through her artwork, and that'll finish up the slideshow there. And I wanted to show some of the illustrations. Hang on one second. Sorry.
I have a question maybe for Trina. Are these women that Lilly portrays, are those super women? I mean, they're elegant, they have the high heels, they, seem, sophisticated ladies, but at the same time, they do all these amazing fighting things.
But they're not superheroines.
No.
Superheroines wear costumes and fly and have special powers. These are humans, human women who happen to be extremely gorgeous and live adventurous lives and have no fear. They're courageous and beautiful, but they're not superheroines. I like that much better because it tells us that you as a woman, you the reader, can be beautiful and courageous.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need superpowers or a fancy costume, although you definitely, obviously need beautiful clothes.
Well, that they all do, right? in Lily's world.
Yes.
Yeah. I think, there's a special, I mean, they're not Barbies, they are alive, definitely, but very specific type of women, I would say. Do you agree?
And really, she herself was so beautiful. And she looked a lot like Senorita Rio. You see why Senorita Rio was her favorite character.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I've lost my screen somehow. I can't figure out how to get you guys back. Hold on a sec. Oh, where we go? I'm sorry. All right, so I'm going to bring in another screen. I thought I was.
So are there other comic artists who jumped on the boat and also created women heroines?
Fiction House again. The company she worked for just happens to be my favorite Golden Age company because their stories always featured beautiful women. They specialized in that, in having a lot of, whereas the other companies had male superheroes, or male heroes, they specialized in women who had their own stories and were very strong and beautiful, not just Lily's characters, but lots of, they had jungle queens and women detectives, and they were all very wonderful and beautiful. And there were other women working there too. They came after Lilly. The next woman that worked for Fiction House was, oh my God, suddenly I can't think of her name.
Fran Hopper.
Thank you, Fran Hopper, who was an art student and took a job drawing for Fiction House, thinking it was just going to be a summer job, but she wound up staying and being a major cartoonist also. And there were other women, Marcia Snyder, who was an incredibly good artist.
Fabulous. Yeah.
Lilly actually drew, not for Fiction House on her own time, a comic, or she started to draw panels to pitch a story of her and Fran based on her
Yes.
as young women. And the panels
Yes.
are so beautiful. And I still think, is there a way to tell this story? Is there a way to pitch the story and use her panels as a base? Because what an incredible story of these two young women comics breaking into this, male space, and both of their art was beautiful. And I'm really sad because I learned that Fran had just died, and I didn't get an opportunity
Yes.
to catch her on camera.
I got to see her and interview her, and it was
like?
a wonderful. Oh yes, it was a wonderful experience, especially because after Fiction House, a lot of them went on, including Lilly, went on to do teenage girl comics, like what you were just talking about. And I I knew that Ruth Atkinson, who was another woman who worked for Fiction House, I knew that she had drawn the first year of Patsy Walker comics, but each issue also had one story by a different woman or a different person who was not credited. But I looked at the work and I said, that's Fran Hopper. And so I took photocopies of those pages and showed it to her. And she said, yes, I drew that.
Oh, that's
So
great.
I even made a whole new discovery by meeting Fran.
So I'm sorry, it took me a little while to get this stuff up, but I just wanted to show one of the things that we had to do during the film is to show certain things that were dramatic moments that couldn't necessarily be recreated through archive footage. So this was a moment when Lilly and her family had to register at a synagogue, and there were German soldiers around, and it was one of the most frightening moments she had before she left Vienna. But we had a really good artist named Judd Doherty who did 14 illustrations for us. This is one of them. The second one is when she ran away from home and slept when she was in Leeds. She slept out in front of an employment agency when she was 17 years old and lied about her age to be 18 and became a nanny. Now, she was an only child, so you can imagine that, and she grew up in a fairly privileged home, so it probably was totally new to her and pretty frightening for her to run away from home and decide to take care of children as a nanny, but she did.
David, I'd like to comment that all of these illustrations by a different artist, by Ann Timmons, are in my graphic novel about Lilly Renee. And it looks like the artist must have seen the graphic novel because he is kind of redrawing the illustrations.
Well, that's interesting. I never asked Jed I know that he got the German soldier from a book that I gave him. I don't know where he got the rest of the
But
pieces.
each of the scenes, including this one, are in my book, except drawn by Ann Timmons.
Oh, right. This is when she got picked up by the Scotland Yard and she spent the night in prison, in jail, waiting to leave England. And she was rescued by someone there. And then this is when she was talking to the editor at Fiction House to get her original job. She was upset because he was laughing at her. And they were based on the stories that she told. So,
but he wasn't, it's very obvious. He wasn't laughing. What he was laughing at was that she was so very young and she had these comic panels.
oh yeah, he wasn't laughing at the drawing. He was laughing at the circumstance.
He thought she was cute, and she was cute,
Yeah, I think she was a little self-conscious. If you watch the movie, she talks about the fact that she felt uncomfortable in.
Of course she did.
Yeah,
You know,
of course.
she was the only woman, you know, in the waiting room, you know, everyone, all these other artists who had come because of the ad, and they were all men. And there she is sitting there, young Lily, 18 years old, you know?
And really pretty.
Yes.
And to Trina's point, when Lilly shared her story with me, she tells her story the same way over and over. And I thought it was so interesting that Trina said she almost tells it like a comic book. I think that format allowed her to sort of crystallize these memories, and it's a lot about memory. And because I sat with her for so long, she also filled in the blanks of the art she made and her life and you know, other aspects of her art and her personal life, which is why we almost had enough for a feature. But it's interesting the way we craft our memories. And my take is that there was a lot of trauma and maybe some traumatic things that aren't in her portrayal of everything that happened. But I think having the format of comics like in her DNA now, that was able to save her and allow, it was therapeutic for her, because when we compared stories of the beats that she hit when she told her story, it was so cinematic. So I just think, to Trina's point, she told her story in a way that saved her, but there's probably some potentially traumatic stuff that just doesn't make it into the retelling, but does make it into the art if you look at it.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
We have a question from
Oh,
Ellen.
wait, before Rick said that, sent a comment, and he said that the Comic-Con was 2012.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was earlier than 2018. By the way, I'm really sorry, but next door they're doing construction work, so I hope that sound isn't getting in the way.
That's okay. Actually, Allison says also Lilly did say that the Star Wars stormtrooper helmets were stolen or borrowed from her. So they were real models for her artwork. And Ellen is actually asking whether women created solely from Lilly's imagination, or did she say that she got inspiration from Hollywood female stars of the time, like Hedy Lamarr and so on?
You know, that's an interesting thing, because I always thought that Lilly looked like Hedy Lamarr. She looked a lot like Hedy Lamarr, who also was a Jewish Austrian woman.
Yeah.
And they were about the same age, I think.
Yeah. Actually, someone says, Rose says, I imagined Hedy Lamarr playing her cartoon heroines, Beauty and Brains, which seems to be what Lilly is as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw that question about the any art exhibits. Yeah, there was obviously the exhibit that was in Vienna 2 years ago, and then it followed into the Austrian
Cultural Forum, the Austrian Cultural Forum. Yes, and we were both there.
Yeah, and it was a great show, and you know, I learned about several artists that I didn't know about before. But it was interesting to see the breadth of her work, because it wasn't just comic work. It was her illustrations and her paintings, and it was really fabulous to see the breadth of what she had done.
And a children's book, a lovely book for kids.
Yeah.
And we let Adrienne have one.
That's nice.
So for how many years did she create comics? And she also did she also have partners who were in the same business?
She worked for a while. She worked with her second husband, Eric Peters, who was also an Austrian refugee. And they drew Abbott and Costello comics.
For St. John.
Excuse me?
For St. John, yeah.
Yes, for St. John. And she also did teenage comics, romance comics for St. John.
She worked for about 12 years, from 43 to 55.
Mhm.
As late as 55. I didn't realize that.
Well, I don't know if there were reprints, but I know that stuff was that some of the things that got published, both Avon and St. John, I think, were that late.
Mhm.
What was published in 55?
I'd have to look. I just had a couple. I just had the finish dates for when she finished.
Mhm. So Lisa is asking Trina, you said that Lilly was fighting Nazism with her
Yes.
pen. To what extent do you also think she was fighting towards feminism for women's rights?
Well, they weren't even using the term feminist in those days. In those days, feminist meant the early women who wanted, who paraded around because they wanted women to be able to vote, and that had been in, we got the vote in 1920. So I don't think she would have called it feminist, but I know that, working in Fiction House, that first year, especially when she was the only woman there, she just hated it, because the men were horrible. She said that the writers used to call who were a little older and more mature, used to call the artists animals, and that were constantly sexual innuendos going around the room, and they tried to teach her to curse in English. And she said she used to cry herself to sleep in those days. And things got a little better when more women showed up. Fran Hopper and Ruth Atkinson. She roomed with Ruth Atkinson for a while, and Marcia Snyder. So I think if she was fighting for feminism, which she wouldn't have used that term, she was just fighting to be regarded as an equal human being and not treated like a sex object.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, David, can you tell me, or maybe it's another Trina question, what was the specific, what made Fiction House special? Like, it's all this.
They were very special. Like I said, first of all, they hired in the days and during the war, when comic companies started hiring women, they hired the most women. They had the most women working for them. They did the stories, so many stories by the men and women that had women heroes, featured women heroes, featured them on the covers. The women, of course, were all very beautiful, and were very pin-uppy, but by today's standards, they're just beautiful women. But in those days, they showed a lot of leg. They were, in those days, they did wear short skirts, and the women were always jumping around and the skirts were flying up. So you saw a lot of leg.
Well, the other thing is, the comics in the 40s, in the quote golden age, are not like they are now. They used to have a lot of features. So they'd have 4 or 5 features in a 64-page comic book.
Oh, yeah. So
there were 6, 7, or 10 or 12-page stories. I mean, in the height of her career in 1944, 45, she was doing 20 pages a month, which is considerable. That's a page a day, during a normal weekday, which is considerable. But there was so much variety that it gave, there were a lot of different characters that were highlighted in each one of their books. I think Fiction House, when they first started, had 6 comics that they highlighted, and had characters in each one of them that they would. But Senorita Rio was their prime character.
They had, it was men and women drawing the women characters. Matt Baker, who is like, one of my all-time favorite artists. He did Tiger Girl, who was a jungle heroine. He did others also. There was Glory Forbes, who was a detective. So many women. All the names are escaping me now.
Yeah, and the other thing is there are a lot of artists.
Sky Girl, she was a pilot. Go on.
There were a lot of artists that started there and ended up becoming popular in the 50s, and started their careers there, like Graham Ingalls and Lee Elias and
Lee Elias drew Fire Hair,
Yeah,
who was
exactly.
a white girl living with and growing up with Indians. And she was always fighting the bad guys who were white.
Because there aren't very many red-haired Indians, are there?
Yes.
We have one question. I think that we need to fill out the biography a little bit. Alan is asking what Lily's experience during the kinder transport was, and in England. And I don't know who wants to.
Well,
and how she was.
I talk about that in my graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a good experience. She was not alone in this. It happened to a number of other kinder transport children also, which is that her host, who was the mother of her pen pal in Leeds, England, that she really was expecting a free house cleaner or a free maid, and she tried to put Lily to work cleaning the house, and Lily was very bad at it. She'd grown up in an upper class family and was not even allowed into the kitchen at home. So she was very bad at cleaning the house, and the mother simply gave up on that. And she got her revenge by starving Lily. What she would do is she would they would all have breakfast together. Then she would send Lily off on errands, and while Lily was gone, she would have lunch. And Lily would come back and there was no lunch for her. And after that, they would have high tea, which is what they did in England. And she says that she survived on high teas because, then she could eat with everyone.
Which is served at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yes, yes. So between breakfast and 4 o'clock, she had no food. And that's why she left home, why she ran away and found work as a nanny first, and then
She also talked about the fact that they made fun of the fact that she didn't know where her parents were. And
yes, her pen pal's mother said, "You don't know if your parents are dead or alive."
Yeah.
And she did.
I think she was at the end of her rope when she decided to leave, that's for sure.
Oh yeah. She had it.
But then she found out that the parents had made it to the US.
Yes, and they sent for her, yes.
And
they were searching for her because since she had left her family where she was supposed to be, they had to find her. And it took some time for them to be able to connect and send her a boat ticket.
That was Bloomsbury House, which existed in London. And what Bloomsbury House did was they put the kinder transport kids back in touch with their parents, whom they had lost touch with because England declared war on Germany in 1939, and there was no more contact. They all lost contact.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. What an amazing travel. And do you know, is Lily still creating art, or did she continue to create art after she stopped drawing?
She did, but she is not drawing anymore. She's 100 years old, and
Right.
she's 100 years old. That's all.
But the thing is, up until about 4 or 5 years ago, she was still going to college at Hunter College taking classes. I mean, you listen to hear stuff like that, it's just amazing.
Oh no, she's remarkable,
Yeah. Thank you so much. I don't see. Do you have any final thing that you want to say about Lily? Maybe something you like best about her spirits or her art, or Adrienne, do you want to?
Well, she just, she's old world, and so she's very elegant.
Mm-hmm.
I was just impressed by her elegance.
Mm-hmm.
And when you saw that picture in Newsweek, you just went, wow, that's pretty amazing. I mean, I think she was 90 years old when that picture was taken.
Yes.
And she's wearing a black dress. She's tall and thin and elegant. And you just look at her and she has a great presence. And, you know, you can see that in the film when you watch. She
has a wonderful accent. I adore her accent. I mean, she would phone me, and as soon as this voice said, Trina, I knew it was Lilly, because no one else. The only other person I ever heard who speaks like that are the Gabor sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that, you know, she, as I said, she had very specific opinions. She definitely drove she upped the quality of the film, and she really, what she did was she drove me to have a consistent vision. She would say, what is your film? What is it? And is it just Senorita Rio? And that is a gift to anyone directing a documentary, because a documentary can take you in so many different directions. So between Lilly and David, and sometimes I would really agonize, and I would think, I would think about the sweep of her life, and I would think, she's earned it. She has earned this communication style, and it's made everything better. And I thought it was really funny. Like, some people might be like, oh, you're telling my life story, thank you. And she was like, you're telling my life story, and how are you going to do it?
You better do it right.
You better do it right. And I learned a lot from that experience. And I hope everyone takes that with them. Like, just because someone is doing you a solid, like, but how are they going to do it? So anyway, I still think about our interactions, and I apply that to other things that I'm working on. It's like, what is this story and why?
Right.
By the way, I got to tell you, I've been in the film business for 50 years, and I used to do mixes and watch films over and over and over again, to the point where I couldn't watch them anymore, or I would make fun of them. I still watch Lilly and still get goosebumps when I watch
I
it.
do too. I get teary when she starts talking. I get teary, and I was there.
And I never get tired of watching it, because it's a really incredible story. And everyone that I've shown it to goes, wow, that's amazing. And it is.
Someone asked when we can see the film, and David and I are working on distribution. It'll probably be something pretty low maintenance that you can access on the internet, but we'll make sure that Rachel has that information to send to her members of her organization.
What I think is so great about the film is that, you know, because there are lots of photos of her, but in the film we see her, and she speaks and she moves, and we're really meeting her. You know, you can really meet her.
That's true. And actually, thanks to Adrienne, the film is available to our audience. So if you go to our website, to the link where you signed up for this event, you can watch Lilly. Thank you so much, Adrienne, for making that available. And thank you so much, Trina Robbins, Adrienne Gruben, and David Armstrong, for sharing your stories and this discovery and discussing Lilly Renee's life and work with us.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I actually myself discovered Lilly Renee this year through the exhibition at the Austrian Cultural Forum. And the exhibition, as you said, David, originated at the Jewish Museum in Vienna. And on January 5th next year, we'll host the two curators of the exhibition, Sabine Bergler and Michael Freund. So our Fritz Ascher Society's Lilly Renee discovery continues, and I hope you're really part of this. And again, thank you so much for this conversation, and stay healthy and be well, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Be well. Goodbye.